Okay. And Jason is the proprietor of a company called Bouncing Fish in London, and I think you certainly do mobile development. You also do, I guess, web development, .NET stuff as well?
Yeah, I don't do as much .NET as I used to, mainly because I want to focus on mobile, but my background and our background was, me and my wife ran a company, the original sort of version of Bouncing Fish, if you like, and we did Microsoft-based solutions, so we did .NET, ASP, SQL Server type solutions. And then more recently, I've got into the mobile side and obviously Titanium, and that's what I'm really focusing on now. So I don't take on any real web projects anymore. I'll sort of do mobile apps, really.
Okay, great. So, as I said, we saw Jason speak, and he did a great job. And he graciously offered to speak to our group. So, Alloy is I told you before. Alloy is Accelerator's MVC framework, which allows you to structure basically your code, hopefully to do a better job of separating out, the business logic from the look and feel and so on. We had a previous talk, I think it was either February or March, by Aaron Saunders, who's really an expert on Alloy, and he gave us a good overview. And I think Jason is also going to give us an overview, so people who haven't actually worked with it yet might get some of that. And then he's going to delve into more specifically in terms of the MVC framework. He's going to talk about the views in terms of the views and the styling. And most recently, Accelerator added the ability to do dynamic styling. And Jason has developed a widget, which is kind of like a reusable programming element in Accelerator or in Titanium. And he's going to talk about that as well. So, Jason, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay.
Let's see.
Cool. Let's see if I can share my desktop.
Okay, we see green.
Okay, can you see this?
Yes, I do.
Cool. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, right? That's good.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just going to page through this, and then I'll do a bit of jumping into some code. So yeah, John pretty much said what I do, but basically I develop apps. Company name's Bouncing Fish. My Twitter and GitHub links are there, and I've got a few sort of open source libraries and widgets on there. Personal blog is JSonified, and I've probably been full-time freelancing now since about October last year, so it's been coming up to a year of full-time freelance. And before then I was working for agencies and working for different companies, either managing teams or running web teams. And since then it's gone a bit crazy, so I've been working for quite a few clients, as you can see there, building web apps or building mobile apps in Titanium, Android and iOS. But also getting involved as sort of architect and helping out troubleshooting. I seem to get a lot of Android conversion projects at the moment, so people that are focused on iOS and end up in that trap where they haven't tested it on Android and need some help converting to Android. So I've sort of become the unsung hero of Android development and Android conversion at the moment. I also do a bit for Accelerator themselves, so I spend about 20 hours a week doing some architecture work for Accelerator on enterprise clients. And those are the three little rugrats that keep me busy as well. So first of all, what I wanted to do was just give a bit of background. I don't know how many of you, and I can't see you, I have to put my presentation on screen, but I guess John could do a show of hands to sort of, out of the group there, who's actually played with Alloy.
Oh, let me see if I can.
Knows what Alloy is.
Okay, you can see at least part of the group now.
Oh, there we go. So how many of you have actually used Alloy for production apps you've been working on? Okay, cool. So this won't be a super short presentation if I have to skip all this. So I'll give you a really quick overview of Alloy, talk about some of the concepts of Alloy, and then focus more towards styling and how the styles work, and then talk about the new dynamic styles, which are really straightforward to go through. There's only a couple of methods that I'm really going to focus on today that allow you to sort of change your app on the fly, and also the widget that I did, which was sort of pre 1.2 to solve a problem that I had with an app that I was trying to develop. So let me go back into this. So the basic basic concept of alloy is it's a framework that sits on top of titanium, and it's important, which I'll go through in a slide in a minute, to understand that it's a pre-compilation framework. It's all of the work with the alloy code is done at pre-compilation stage. And so what you end up with is titanium code, pure titanium code. There's no runtime element to it. It's not retranslating the alloy code into titanium on the fly. The basic framework is MVC, so models for data. So what I heard John talking about as I came in earlier in terms of data binding, SQL, and all the things SQL-like databases, and accessing those models that provide the raw data. Then you've got views that are your user interface, and the easiest way to explain this when you're dealing with alloy is like a web page. You know, HTML is like your views. They're done in XML, very similar in terms of the way it's laid out. That's your UI, and then controllers is obviously the logic, and that's going to be the JavaScript side of things. Those are the three basic concepts. There's the extra one in there to do with view, style, which is the TSS, but I guess that doesn't work in that sense. And that's the basic concept of what alloy is. Now, personally, from my side with alloy, I've actually focused I focused less on the models because I've been doing alloy projects where I'm using APIs. So I tend to have like a lib folder and then have a library, JS library to access an API. So I've done a little bit with models, but not a huge amount. My main focus has been on the other side, you know, the views, controllers, the style, and the libraries to APIs. So the views are XML files. If you think of an HTML file and the way it's structured, the top level element is HTML. In Alloy, it's Alloy. And then underneath that, you have tags that are essentially the normal UI elements of Titanium. And it's quite easy to transition. There's documentation and guides. If you want to create a table view, then it's simply creating a table view tag, as shown here, and you can give it an ID. And I've actually created that as a self-closing tag, for example, because then I can manipulate that from the controller to populate it. So any object that you normally do with Titanium, table, button, table view, scroll view, is immediately transposable into Alloy by just using its normal name with a first letter capital and camel case for the second part. So, table view, button would be capital B for button, label same, capital L. And so it's quite easy to take a normal element and create that structure. And what you'll see in a minute from the other slides that I've got, and those of you familiar with Alloy will know this, is there's lots of advantages with the XML and the way that it lays out the parental relationship between elements, and it allows you to visualize the views much more easily than normal Titanium. So if we're thinking like XML is like our HTML, then our layout, our TSS, is very much like CSS. It shares many common characteristics. You can have class-based definitions, you can have ID-based definitions, you can chain those classes so that you could specify multiple class names per object, so that you could break down your views into, let's say, vertical would be a class, so that you can have a vertical layout, or left or right, or red or blue, or large or small, things like that. Or you can be much more specific in the way you style. There aren't selectors at the moment, unfortunately, in Alloy, so you can't do sort of the selections that you can do in CSS and sort of target a particular ID with a particular div. But at the top level, first pass at a CSS-like language is pretty flexible and pretty powerful. And then we have logic. Our sort of business logic is then in the controller. And you can actually have controllerless views as well, so you don't have to have a controller. But that's where basically your JS files are, that you're there to populate the object. You can call a library that gets the data and renders out the work, things like that. And there's also the capability to have a lib file. So I'll show you a point structure, and I'll show you some code shortly. And the lib folder can then have common JS style JS modules in there that would, for example, go off to Twitter or something, go off to an API. And that's what I've been using mainly instead of the model website. And that's the last one there, which, again, I touched on briefly, but I know it's not on the model side. One of the really cool things you can have in Alloy is widgets. And I'll show you the structure of a widget, and I'll show you the TSS one that I've done. But widgets are really cool because they're almost like self-contained Alloy projects. And you can create them with a definition file, a JSON configuration file. You can package them in GitHub to be able to download. And then someone can add that into their Alloy project, into a widgets folder. They add a quick item into their config, say that they're going to use that widget in their project, and then they drop the tag into their view, and it drops the logic of that widget then into the view, that particular project. And I'll show you how I've done that with my one. But there's a couple of cool little tricks that you can do. There's a couple of little hidden objects in Alloy, a bit like sort of double underscore proto object in JavaScript. It gets some access to the main view, which is what I've done to be able to do what I've done with the TSS, Dynamic TSS switching. So I've shamelessly stolen the next 4 slides and borrowed them from because he did a great presentation at Dutch Mobile Conference on Alloy. So these few slides just sort of explain it. So here's the classic window hello world type app. You can see on the left we've got, well, everyone would recognize the normal identifier. Create a window, create a label, and an event, and this is the label in this case. So they add the label to the window and open the window. And you know, it's straightforward Titanium. In any normal example, you look at that, you get what's going on. You can understand it. But as you know, what happens when you start building real apps in the real world is it doesn't look like that, and you start getting huge amounts of code, and it's very difficult to see the relationship. It's difficult to understand that once you've got more views in there, with a header and a footer, and then scroll in the middle, what the relationships are. When we go to Alloy, what we end up with is this little structure, the method application. So instead of our JS folders defining everything, we've got a views folder, a styles folder, and a controllers folder. And inside views, we have indefinite table. Just think of it as your root file. It's just like an HTML. And that has our main Alloy tag, our window tag, and our label. And the nice thing about this is you can immediately see the relationships. You know, Alloy is always the top level element. You can't get away from that. But once you get into the file, you can see that the label is obviously in the window. And if there were views in that window, and labels and buttons in those views, you can immediately see the relationship. With the formatting that you can do and nesting that you can do with the XML, it's really easy to see that, you know, which part belongs to which. And in this case, you can also keep an on-click event. So you can specify, and you can do this down preference really. You can actually put on events inside the tag. So go on click, you want that start, on long press, and all the different event names. It's just on and then the event name. And then they're pointing to a function called open. And in this case, if you look at controllers /index.js, we can see that there's an open function, and that then is doing things that we want that to do when that label gets clicked. On the left, you can see we've got style, and that's the index.tss. And the names obviously have to match. So, you know, these are all the files that relate to the index. If I was doing another view called contact, then I'd have a contact.js with contact and a context.js. And the styles are very much like CSS. In this case, we have a window definition, a window tag, which makes it white. The labels will be black. So any other labels I add to this will be black. If I wanted to target a particular label, I'd give it an ID and then do a hash ID type selector for the TSS to be able to target that particular ID on the screen. And I can also do the dot notation to have a class, and I can specify a class within that. And I'll show you some proper examples of these in the actual code in a second. We can advance to the next slide. There we go. So here's an example where we've got a couple of labels. We've created a basic label with a hello text, and then we've created two labels with a class text, and then we created on the second one, we give it an ID called world, and the text obviously says world. And then if you look at the TSS, we're saying that we want all labels with the class of text to have shadow color of black, but we want the world label to be a color of overriding that class. And it works on that basis of tag, then class, and then ID in terms of the ordering. There's also an app.tss that isn't created by default when you create Alloy. And that's your global styles. So you can actually create maybe your top level definitions for windows, labels, you know, maybe you want all labels to be black by default, and all windows to have a white background. We have that black visual land or you can set all that stuff up in the app.tss at the start, and then override it on a case by case basis if needed. You can also see on the controller this sort of dollar notation. So whenever you see the dollar notation within a controller, dollar means the current controller we're in. So this is simply saying, in the current controller, I will select the ID called, the object ID called world, the object ID called index, which in this case is the window. So that would be the actual window within in the alloy tag. So when you move from TI Classic to Alloy, it's important to understand a few things. Alloy is based on the CommonJS principle, so it's based on isolating code into these modules and videos without that loop and flow and scope, and allowing you to require those into other parts of your app. You just reuse that functionality, but keep everything modules in time. And Alloy is built on top of that framework. It's important to understand the actual titanium underneath. I mean, what Alloy is doing is creating classic titanium code, and you can jump, in theory, you can jump into Alloy without really getting into titanium, but if it starts to go wrong for you, you're not really going to understand what's happening. And it's also going to get quite difficult if you try and stay within the total Alloy way of doing things, when you might want to just jump into normal titanium code for a couple of bits of functionality that you need. So it is important to understand that. And I know a few people that have tried to jump straight into Alloy, and they've got the basics, they've started putting apps together, but they end up making some classic mistakes that we've all learned doing titanium that you shouldn't really do, because it's quite easy to make those mistakes in Alloy. So, for example, people get into that habit of treating views, those XML views, like web pages. So they'll create loads and loads of views to sort of almost as containers, as wrappers, to contain different elements. And before they know it, they've created nestings of views within this structure, that when it gets created on the device, there's a massive overhead in view. I've worked on an app recently that was developed by somebody where they had about 100 extra views in the screen that were unnecessary. It was a table for your listing. And I managed to remove 100 views without affecting the look and feel of the app at all, but obviously the performance of that table was improved because it wasn't rendering all those things. And because of what's happening under the hood, it's easy to get hidden away from all the magic that Alloy does. Alloy is taking your Alloy structures and your Alloy XML files and TSS, and it's pre-compiling that into, or pre-coding that into Titanium JS. There's nothing that's done on the fly, apart from the Dynamic TSS stuff that I'll show you. And it also, that means there's no overhead, which I'll go through properly in a second. The other key thing about Alloy is that it sort of takes you away from the resources folder. And I'll show you this in the project structure. You actually work within a top-level folder called app, and all of your work is done in there. You don't touch any other folder, even you can touch the normal modules and platform folder. But the resources folder is almost untouchable, and the biggest indicator of that is that it doesn't appear in TI Studio. So you can turn that on, but TI Studio hides the resources folder by default, because whenever you run your app, that folder is rebuilt based on the Alloy code. And that's quite an important sort of feature of how Alloy works. The other important thing with Alloy is that you can mix. It isn't a switch to Alloy and everything has to be done in Alloy and that's it. Alloy is based on Titanium, and there are cases where, in the example I showed you earlier, and I'll show you another example in a second, where the on-click event in the XML, there's two schools of on that at the moment. One is that you shouldn't put, it's easy to put it in the XML file because it's a logical place for it to go. It tells you what that button is relating to. The other school of thought is that it's harder to read the JavaScript because when you go to the JavaScript function, logically like click button 1 or something, then you're not really sure of the relationship with the JavaScript between the functions until you look at the XML. So what some people do is use the normal identifier. So they'll actually define their XML as the simple view. They'll define the TSS as the layout of that view. And in the JS, they'll do all their events. Because there's just one place that you have to look to see exactly what's going on with the code. So you can mix based on what you're trying to do. So the advantages of Alloy is it separates the UI from the logic. So unlike normal Titanium, we can have potentially huge JS files which makes all of your user interface code and your logic for your app, you've now got a very clear separation. Changes without having to mess around with JS. And you know what it's like if you need to make an adjustment for Android for something, you need to move something by a few pixels, and you can end up changing a property or removing a property, leaving a trailing comma, or just doing something wrong in the JS. When you then run the app, at least a program, when you run the app, it creates some sort of bug, creates a problem. And all you've done is change something, you move something 3 pixels to the left, and you crashed your app. Well, what Alloy does is separate that into the views of the TSS, so that you're just changing one value. You're not affecting any JS. You're not changing any of your logic. You're just changing that one value, which means changing things is much quicker, and it's potentially less risk of bugs. The next thing is, and I've mentioned this a few times, is that Alloy is pre-compiled. It's basically taking your code to bring Alloy using the Alloy or TSS. It's building Titanium JS code. And that's really important because it means that there's no runtime. And the other thing that it means is that it only includes the code that you need to run your app. And this is a really important part of the cross-platform side of Alloy. If you've written normal Titanium code, you've either dealt with platform-specific things a number of ways. You've either put conditional code in your JS. So if this is Android, do this. If this is iOS, do this. Or you've done a default and then overwritten it for the one that doesn't work properly. Or you've done platform-specific folders, and you've stuck everything in an Android folder. And then you've worked out what the platform is and loaded the relevant Stylin or relevant or common JS module for that platform. But when you compile that app, or when you build that app for the device, all of that code is included. So all of the Android code is sitting inside the iOS app. It's never run, but it's sitting there and it's still taking up space, even if it's a few K. And any conditional logic you put in is still being run. So even if it's running on iPhones, it's still checking, am I running on an iPhone? Every single time. When you put your code within blocks, Alloy conditions, or your views with platform-specific tags, only the code that's relevant to the platform view, and it removes anything else, which is really cool. And the final thing there is Common JS. It's Common JS based, so it's really important to create Common JS modules and add Common JS functionality. And if you're not familiar with Common JS, it's really the preferred way of now dealing with reusability. And we had a presentation tonight by another speaker at the London group who talked about the fact that in, I think it's 3.2, they're going to be dropping the global object in Titanium, so that you really do have to use Common JS to start managing global scope and reusability with components. And then the other thing Alloy has is it has some functionality built in, other libraries built in, like Backbone, Underscore, Moment.js, and other tools that make it a lot easier to do things that those libraries are good at. So Backbone is the event handling, the event model, the model system. With Underscore, it allows you to with Underscore, it you do things with different arrays, lots of really cool additional functionality that you wouldn't normally have in Titanium. And Moment.js is a really cool time library for data calculation. So,
Jason?
What are the challenges?
Jason? I'm just interrupt you here for 1 second, okay? Unfortunately, since you're not in the room, it's hard to get kind of the interactivity going. So I was wondering, would it be okay if we take a little break here just to ask if there's questions before you move on?
Yep.
Maybe if maybe as you kind of get through points, if you want to just stop and ask if there's questions, that'll help a little bit with the back and forth.
Okay.
Does anybody here have a question based upon what was said already that you want to ask about before we move on? After all that. Did people pretty much understand what was talked about? Okay. All right. I guess we're good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so one of the challenges I had with an app that I had to do this year was an app for YouGov and ITV. It's basically a survey app. And I'll see if I can load the app up. It's going to run for me. It's called Live View. And I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this on the screen?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. So Live View is basically a survey app This is just a basic tutorial that's run it, and it just takes you through the app. And what the app's going to do is basically have a survey. It's like a census type thing when you're watching a TV show. So the idea is you watch a TV show, you have a slider on the screen, you move the slider to the right if you're enjoying it, and you move to the left if you're not enjoying it. And the data is collected and sent up to a server, and they can then use that to analyze the show. But one of the issues that I had when the designs came through is that, this is just a simple tutorial. It's pretty simple. It's text and images on a scroll view, effectively, on a horizontal scroll view. But when the designs came through, they wanted the layout to be slightly different. So, for example, this is actually using the dynamic, or my dynamic code, not the normal Alloy code. So they wanted the text to be on the left and the image to be on the right in this example. And when we actually get down to the app itself, let me just run a bit of code that I need to run to simulate there being a show to import. So here's an example show. This is what the countdown looks like. I've only got 8 seconds to show you this before it changes. So you can see that the layout completely changes. And so they needed this, they wanted this design, it's pretty much the same at the moment, but that countdown screen, they wanted that to change and be a completely different layout for landscape and portrait. And that was a bit of a challenge because, you can do a sort of fluid design to some extent, but really it's going to be a bit like this. When you rotate the screen, things are just going to sort of rearrange themselves as per the orientation. But what they wanted to do was completely move that around and change the layout completely. And that was something that I couldn't do at the time with normal Alloy, because the way Alloy was working was that everything's pre-compiled. So I'm creating those TSS styles, and I can't change those on the fly. They don't, there's no capability to do that. So when you came across this problem with version 1 of Alloy, there was only sort of 3 ways to do it. So the problem that I had was that the styles specified in the TSS, they're pre-compiled or pre-coded into JavaScript, and I wanted to be able to change them at runtime. So my 3 choices were, I could either manually do it, so I could literally put JS code into the controller and say, override these styles with these values on the fly. I could use an Alloy widget, I could build a widget to do this, which would at least make it a little bit more easy. Well, I tried to do that at the time, and I was struggling with the normal way that Alloy works with widgets, because traditionally a widget is almost like, it's just a self-contained object. And so a good example of a widget is a date picker. So you might drop a date picker widget on a view, and when the view loads, the date picker appears, and when you click it, it fires a backbone event or a trigger that can then be picked up by the hosting view, and then it can act on the data that gets passed to it. Excuse me. So it's a very self-contained thing. Whereas what I wanted the widget to do is be able to interact with the elements that are actually on a host view, if you like, which I didn't really know how to do at the time. And the other option, obviously, now is using Alloy using style. So where I was, I ended up sort of using option 1, which is the only real way I could do it at the time. But what I did was I sort of changed my approach, because I didn't want to have style information in the JS. I felt like I was using Alloy correctly, using the TSS to structure the app. And then I was sort of cheating by doing my style overrides within the actual JS file itself. So what I did was come up with a way of using what I describe as substyles. I'll show you this properly in a second, where I can actually create substyles within TSS, and I can dynamically switch to those styles. So I'll just jump about this and just show you what I mean before I move on, and I'm going to come back and show you properly. But if you look at, so that you can see this, if I can size a bit bigger. Oh, as I say, I just decided to hang on me. Hold on a second. Great. Here we go. Okay. I think you can see this. So the way I did it was I created, here's my TSS for the label. And hopefully you can see this.
Could you blow it up a little more, Jason? There you go. That's good.
There you go. Okay.
That's good.
So here's my TSS for the label. And I'm specifying a way for the color of the font, all the normal things. And then what I basically did was come up with this concept of having the substyle. So this would be my default. and then I had a landscape style and a portrait style. What I did was dynamically change that up time using applied properties. And that worked, and that's what you were seeing on that demo just then, where it's all rearranged. And it was a good solution for me because it meant I still kept within the style of using TSS, so I wasn't cheating, I felt. I was still using the TSS model. The problem was, it was a lot of code. I say a lot of code, I will show you right now, actually, but it was basically a function I had to put in the global, alloy global. There was code that you had to drop in every controller, and it just seemed like a bit, not a bit of effort, but it just seemed like hassle that I had to drop in JS code into every file that I wanted to deal with. So I wanted to come up with a better way of doing it. So let me just jump back to the presentation. So I have my three choices. So the classic TI method is just mixing TI with Alloy, and it does work, but it doesn't really fit with the MVC model. And it can be difficult to debug and understand. Suddenly taking those views away from the TSS, and you're putting it into your controller function. Someone's going to find that, and it could cause bugs and issues and bugging problems later. So, the simple way of doing that is literally $.labelName.color_red or $.labelName.apply properties and passing in object properties. And that was the approach that I actually used at the time. So I would literally just take the landscape sub-style and pass it to the object, and it would override its styles. But then I wanted to revisit this whole widget thing. And after I did that project, I was really quite obsessed by the fact that I wanted to get this working as a widget. But the key thing I needed to do was to be able to make it, I wanted to make it as simple as possible. I wanted to be able to drop the widget onto a view and do nothing more other than the TSS, and that would be it. And so I managed to get that working, and I'll show you the code for that in a second. So my concept of my widget was to have orientation. That's all it's actually done to do. It basically works on an orientation thing, and then it allows you to apply relevant styles to the view or subset of views based on that orientation change, so that you can move things around. The key thing for me was that I wanted it to be as easy as possible. I literally just wanted someone to be able to drop that XML tag onto a view or onto a window, and it would just work. So the concept is that you drop it into a window or view, and then you add the substyles. And I'll show you what that looks like now. So a basic project here where I've created an index XML. So this is my tab group style view. There's a few different demos in here, but I'll try and grab the one that I want to show you. So here's what we're trying to look at here. So this is window 3. It has an image view, it's got a label, and then it's got my widget. And I've dropped the widget just above the closing window tab. It's important that it has to be dropped above the closing tab so that it can pick up all the other things that have been defined. If you put it at the top, it won't pick up any other objects. So you can always put that widget within the view you want to handle. And the nice thing about it is that if I just wanted a view down here to be the one that handled orientation changes, oops, then I can just put a widget in that view. I don't need to put it in the whole window and have that overhead of the view with the whole window. So I drop the widget, I can call it whatever I want, and I just pop that into that window. And then my IDs of my objects are image 3 and my label. And if I drop it into the TSS, you'll see it here that I've got my label tag, which means this is the definition of any label tag in the view. And I've done my landscape and portrait sub-style that I explained earlier. So with portrait, it's going to be top 50. Landscape is going to be top 50, but it's going to go to the left. And on my image view, I'm going to make it on portrait be 50 pixels from the top or 50 dp from the top. And in landscape, I'm going to move it way over to the right. I'm going to change the width. And I can move it down to that. So here's what it looks like when we run this. Error risk. Get rid of that. Why you should never be done for this. Just try that again. So this is hopefully going to build my except it's not. second. Oh, yeah, it's actually doing it. I've got myself up too. Right, just try it again. Okay. I don't think it's right thing to. Interesting. What's going on here? Right, here we go. Okay. Let's try that again. I was testing this on the train on the way home, but of course now it breaks. Here we go. So it's a really basic app. It's a very quick test app. Which is hopefully going to come in a second. Here we go. That is interesting. I've managed to go and create several cells in the background. It's going to be pretty great. Yeah, let's just see if we can put it together. Here we go. Silence or on day. Right. So this is the view we're talking about. So you can see there I place the label and I place the image. And this is all I've done. So this is all I've done. In this particular case, I've added the substyles, landscape and border, and I've dropped the widget. Sorry, let's go to the index. I've dropped the widget in the window. That's the only two things I've done. And when I change the orientation of the device, the widget is now picking up the orientation set. The widget then navigates through the objects within that view that it's in, which is going to be the label and the image view in this case. It looks for the landscape property, and if it finds the landscape property, applies it to that object. So we end up with an instant switch, which is fairly fluid in the way that it does it. There's no real jumpiness, and it sort of slides over into position. It's pretty quick. It's the same sort of speed on Android, actually. Now, obviously, you want to keep that relevant to a particular view. You want to be dynamic. I wouldn't rotated or changed, and the rest of them will all be the same. So, you need to be careful with that. But it's fairly easy to use. It works on orientation at the moment. I want to add some more features to it. And I also want to add in some alloy way the back will work. So that's a pretty simple demo of that method. Let me jump back to here. So the instruction is, so yeah, my style basically is like to, actually, hold on, maybe I didn't. Yeah, so basically originally I did it to handle orientation. I didn't really do anything else, button or click changes or anything like that. It was literally designed to solve that problem of orientation, because that was something that was missing from the Alloy specific definitions for platforms. You could target, iOS and Android, target tablet, but what you couldn't say was that this is a landscape for orientation. It could be dropped into an existing window here. It stays within the TSS model file, and you can download it from github.com/me. And any feedback you've got, I'd love to hear. And if you want to make changes to it, then by all means, submit a pull request. Now, of course, 1.2 I did is they created dynamic style. And this is pretty cool because it allows you to, on the fly, change the styles of elements or add class elements with a couple of simple methods, or 3 simple methods actually. To add a class, to remove a class, and clear a particular object class to reset it back to what it was. There's a load more methods and capabilities that you can do with this. You can create styles on the fly. But I'm not going to cover that here, and you can see that in the documentation. And I don't really like it, like that side of it. Because, well, I feel like that stays within that TSS model, rather than putting it back into JS. So brand new 1.2, you can create runtime classes, or my preference is, I'm not saying you have to do it, my personal preference, is I still use the TSS, and then what I do is I can add a report class on the fly. So here's an example of taking an object that's label 1. We're using the dollar notation for the controller. So we say $add class, so we're adding a class to the controller. The class is going to be added to label 1, and the class is called big. And if you've got a class within your TSS called big, that will now be applied on top of that label. And if that's going to override any values that were specified, any properties specified previously, then they'll obviously get overridden. The reverse of that is the remove class, which will take that class away, take the property away from that original object, and revert it to what it was before for those particular properties. And then reset class. Reset class just will reset label 1 to how it was when it was first built. So you could use add and remove quite simply to do selected and non-selected labels. So you could add a selected class which could define a bordering or a textual change or a color change, and then do a remove class to remove that back again. And you can do all these things straight in Titanium, straight in the controller, but I just find this is quite a nice clean way of doing it and stays within that alloy model. To show you the same sort of thing that I did with my Windows 3 using my widget, I've done pretty much the same thing with Windows 2 here using the Alloy 1.2 styles. So again, we've got an image view. Again, we've got a label. I've got the on-click there, it's not really relevant. In the embeds, the difference down here is that the way I've done it with this, or the way I've had to do it, is we don't have that same sub-style approach. So I've created a portrait class, a landscape class for label, and an image class for portrait, and an image class for landscape. And I could do this a bit. I could have a label 2 class which defines the base, if you like, and then I could have portrait that does the override. So for example, I could put label 2 in here, and then specify that class against that particular label, then pop up, and then obviously the override is done on top of that. So I've kept it fairly simple, and I've done probably a bit of repetition here. But you could take that and improve on that. So I've got my portrait, my landscape for both images and labels. And in my control file, what I've done is probably another piece of code that can be cleaned up a lot, but it's just trying to explain how this works. I've got an orientation event. Running a function called apply orientation. I'm testing to see what the orientation is, really just checking whether it's in landscape. And then basically I add to the label to the class the landscape, add the image for landscape, and I remove the portrait ones in case they're already there, just so we don't get any overrides and patches. And exactly the same for reverse. So the portrait, I add the portrait classes, and I remove the landscape. And the ordering is quite important. So first, and then I remove the landscape. Because what I found is if you do the reverse first, if you actually put this here, then you get a jittery jumpiness in the animation because it's actually stripping everything back and resetting it, and then it's applying the next one. So it's actually much nicer and much smoother to do it the other way around. As a result of that, I can show you exactly the same app. So here's window 2, apart from a little pixel change for some reason. It's pretty much the same. We've got the the label, and we've got the image. And when I hit the rotate, it's doing exactly the same thing, just in a different way. This is just using the alloy styles, dynamic styles. So it's, at the moment I do the rotation, it's applying the new class to both objects and it's removing the old class. And it just does the reverse. It's actually a tiny bit, you can see it's a little bit more jumpy. It's just a little bit of a thing on the image where I don't know if you can see that on the WebEx, but it's not as smooth as this one. Or maybe it's just me.
WebEx is definitely making jumpy itself, so.
Yeah, that's fine then. But you get the basic idea. It's pretty simple. You're adding the class on top of the existing object and you remove it and you reset it. Now I'm doing an add and remove because I felt that was probably a more optimized way of doing it. I could have done a reset, but obviously a reset then resets it all back to how it was, and then you've got to add the next class on. So I just felt like the add and remove is probably the best way to do it. I'm just putting on slides. So I'm putting on slides, but I'll be in the back. So let me show you. Get rid of that. So what I'm on this screen, I just want to show you the structure of the Alloy project. Those of you that aren't really familiar with it. So we have this top level app folder, and normally resources would obviously, there's the app XML, normally read in here, but obviously it's hidden. You can turn it back on again, here, customize view, and you can say you want resources to be visible. And it will actually make my resources visible again, or it should do. Hopefully. It's not typically. Oh, sorry, that's the way around. There we go. Yeah, so there's no, still not very properly. Well, they're done there. Just make sure. That's the work. If I go to Finder, you can see that we've got the app folder, and we've got the resources folder there. So you can see the app folder we've got here, the build folder that you'd normally expect, and all your normal files, the change logs that people never use. And we've got our resources folder. But this is the folder that gets regenerated. So if I delete everything that's in there and rebuild this project, it's going to regenerate that folder for me. So with Alloy, we have this structure of our assets, like your normal assets folder that you have in your normal resources folder. We have our controllers. I'm not using models, styles, views. You probably can't see this very well. And then widgets go in here. Got a couple of other widgets I can play there. One of which is the tab group that you're seeing there. Is actually a custom tab group. So they need something that works on Android. So that's the basic structure, and that's pretty much it in terms of the style thing. So I don't know if you've got any questions or whether I ran through that too clear or didn't explain anything very well.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to bring you to full screen here. Okay. So you're done with your presentation at this point, Jason?
Sorry?
Are you done with your presentation at this point?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to just bring you full screen, and that way people want to ask questions a little easier, I think.
Okay.
If I can remember how to do this. Give me a sec. Well, it's not terrible. Okay. Does anybody have questions?
Jason, maybe can you talk about some other scenarios where you think dynamic styles would be especially useful? You know, the landscape portrait switch is one, but you know,
dynamic styles. Where dynamic styles would be useful?
Yeah.
To be honest, it depends on the app that you're doing. I mean, with a lot of the apps that you do in Titanium or you can do in Alloy with Titanium, you know, they sort of scale and expand to landscape gracefully. So, you know, in a normal application, I've probably not got a good example I can show you. But I mean, even in a basic app like Safari, you know, when you move to a rotated view, you know, everything sort of changes logically. You know, flexible spaces take care of text boxes going, you know, larger and filling space. So it's a much more responsive look and feel. But there are occasions, and this is the case for me when I was developing this app, and I'll see if I can just show you this again, a bit more clearer this time, where the actual design of the app was quite fundamentally different in landscape view. So I just need to, this thing works by adding 15 seconds onto the timer, but you can press 1 second. So that it does the import. I'm actually doing that. Great. Let me
Jason, you're no longer presenting. We're just. Do you want to?
We're only seeing you at this point.
We're only seeing you. Do you want to go back to the presentation mode?
Let me just try again. I was, it said that I was, so let me just
You
try
were,
again.
yeah, okay, you were. Okay, go ahead.
Is that better? Can you see that?
1 second. 1 second, Jason. Okay, go
It
ahead.
says I'm sharing.
You were good.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so let me just see if I can, let me see if I can show you this again. I've only got about 15 seconds before the timer runs out. So here we go, 10 seconds. So you can see the design there, and then it suddenly changes to be a strip along the bottom.
Right.
Changes back, yeah? So that pretty simple design that they've got and given me is actually a real pain, because in Alloy, the only way you could do that is, or in normal titanium, the only way you could do that is, you know, dynamically changing the position of those things on screen so that they are in, you know, they were stacked previously and they're side by side in the landscape. Let's see if I can show you again. So, you know, it's not impossible. It's something that's doable, and I could have just done it in the standard JS and just made those changes. But what I wanted to do was have something that would just, that's why it doesn't like it. I wanted to do something that was still working within the Alloy type way of doing things, you know, using the TSS and not cheating is the wrong word, but I just felt like I was drifting away from you. So that's the main reason that I came up with this app. It's not to say that, you know, it's not to say that it's the way to do it for everything, but there are, you know, potentially going to be occasions where you might get an app that does look very different in landscape. You know, maybe the elements full screen, or maybe certain things disappear, or the opposite. You know, maybe things don't appear in portrait mode because they can't for some reason, but they can appear in landscape. And the only way to do that is to change those files on the fly. So I think it's more of a case-by-case basis, you know, depending on the design of the app.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, I have a couple of questions. So is another possibility for the use of this technology to do like dynamic theming? Is that kind of, you know?
Yeah, you could do that. I've not played with that side of it yet. I have done dynamic. I'm working on where I have done a variation of the widget code to deal with that. Let's see. Yeah. Might not be in this one actually. Let me just go to home. There we go. So I've got a function here called apply theme, which is a common JS function to the controller. This basically allows me to apply the relevant theme to this particular controller, this particular view, and it's done as an export, so I can actually apply it before I show the view. Because obviously, if I do the open command with the controller, so if I create the controller in Alloy and I open it, then I apply the theme. You see that apply. You see it dynamically change, and all those elements will change. So what I do is do it as a function before I actually open it. So let me see if I can find any example of that. So. So, but basically, I created a particular controller and applied a theme before I show the controller. But that application process, that sort of final theme, let's try and grab a code for that. Here we go. It's using a very similar method. You can see here, theme name is light, theme name is dark. I can actually change it if I want to, so actually let me do that now. Let's see if I'll show you. So I'm using the mdev tag here to just say whether I'm running in the simulator or not. So I'm going to override it with the dark theme. And what that's going to do is apply that theme before it shows the view, so that we're effectively dynamically changing the theme of the app. And now you can do theming in Alloy, but it's designed to be done at runtime. It's designed to be, you set that theme up before we actually down. So you can't do that dynamic change. It's actually doing something. Yeah, there we go. For some reason my machine is slow. It's down completely. I think it's because WebEx is taking up 94%.
Probably.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So this should now have the same app, same code fish cut. So hopefully it should be done. Basically I check to make sure what theme is which, and then I iterate through those controls that have been passed through. So for each control I go through, I look for the particular theme name, and then I apply it. So if I show you the TSS, I'm using a very similar technique to landscape switching. So let me just show you what I mean. Let's look at an example live. So you see here, I've got greeting. I'm specifying all my parameters, and then I have what I'm assuming here basically is that the light theme is the default. So the way I've done it is by an exception. So I'm only specifying the differences to dark. So effectively, this is my whole light theme, but I have this substyle called dark, which I can then use to define the dark changes to that theme. So again, on the welcome, I'm using an opacity, I'm setting a background color. For message intro, it's pretty much the same, except the color changes to white. For footers, the same, doesn't really matter. News text, again, everything stays the same, except dark color has a different color. When we get to things like, what's a good example, the rewards page, rewards screen, there's a little bit more going on here. So again, we've got background color, dark, but this one we've got an image change. So I'm saying that I want the background image to be star icon, which is the purple version. For my dark theme, I'm going to change that to a completely different image file. And so what I'm doing in my code is I'm basically only applying it for the dark changes. So if they want the light theme, it's just default. But if they specify the dark, then I use the light theme as the basis, and then just apply those changes on top of the dark side of things so that it actually makes those changes. And then I have a recursive function here effectively where if I'm not choosing to ignore the children, then I call exactly the same method again, passing it either the views, if the control has views, or the children, if the control has children, based on the type of object it is. And then that just recursively goes through that loop. And it's pretty quick. I mean, on Android and iOS, it's not really noticeable. It happens before the view's loaded, and it's pretty fast. Because all it's really doing is changing the view basic attributes, in this case, or changing an image in more serious cases. But I haven't noticed any overhead really on the site when I've been testing it, so it seems to work. And it's really the only option I've got to be able to do this. I felt, it was the simplest way to do it, where I can keep the beauty of this is I've kept my logic still, within the TSS. It's quite easy to see. I suppose a developer looking at this might think, well, okay, what does dark mean? There might have to be an explanation of what's dark, but maybe I could have called that dark theme or something. But I think it's fairly logical, and it states in the TSS if I wanted to change the color of the dark theme or change, the font size for the dark theme, then I can do that, and I can just specify a different font size. And I'm keeping that logic within the TSS and not messing around with the controller code, which could create all kinds of other problems for me.
So when you're doing static styling, you have, I guess, one advantage, I guess, is you have access to a global style file, right? Is it alloy.tss or something like that?
It's app.tss, yeah. So what I started doing with app.tss, and Alloy is one of these crazy things that as you do each app, you sort of tweak the way you do stuff and you learn stuff from the previous app. So one of the things I learned when I was doing this app is I've created lots of generic styles that I can use. And it allows me to define my views much faster than I would normally. So you can see here, I've created a class called Pink. So the class called Pink is designed for buttons, and it basically allows me to, have all of the pink options for that button, have all of the green options for that button, have all of the white options, and so forth. And then I also have things like white selected, green selected, and pink selected. And the way that manifests itself in my views means that I can sort of do things like this. where I can say, here we go, I can create a delete button, and I can say class button and class pink. So it's now going to use the button class, which defines that button with a border and all the things that it does, with specific font and capitalized text. And then the pink is my color of that button. But what's really cool is that I can actually say, okay, I want that to be pink, but I actually want it to be white selected. So it will actually be pink, but when it's clicked, it will change to be white. And the nice thing is about this is because you can change these things, you can end up defining that global style sheet, or TSS sheet, if you like, and very quickly lay out your views. So another good example is vertical. I created a class called vertical, so that I could really easily just go, okay, class is container, class is vertical. So now the layout of that view will be set to vertical. And it just means that if you get that right with your TSS, you can actually lay out views without having to jump between TSS and set it all up. You can just specify all your classes. But I'm still sort of finding my way with it because, as I say, with each app you do, you sort of try different things, like I've done here with Spacer 5 to create me a sort of 5-pixel spacer in a particular view. So, you know, but yeah, it's pretty cool. App.tss is basically used as a default. It's actually a really good way of setting up almost like your reset. You know, when we used to do CSS, we have that sort of reset CSS script that you can put in, which would, you know, nullify everything and get you back to normal before you set your styles up. You can do that with the app.tss, where you can specify your default label color, default fonts, default window colors, and things like that, and then override from there.
Other questions?
Where does this app.css resides? Is that created when you select the Alloy project in your initial template? Or we have to create one?
I didn't get that.
The question is the app.tss file, he's asking when does that get created? I think you have to do that manually, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. Alloy by default won't create an app.tss. I don't know why it doesn't. So you just create a manual file for app.tss. Set up your base styles in there. You can set up your tags, and then set up your default window tag, label tag, and all those things. That will then get used by default. And then if you specify in the controller or in the view TSS, that will override the app.tss. So it sort of goes app and then individuals, you know, the individual views from there. Based on, and you can also put in there platform specific stuff, which I haven't got an example in here, but I can show you in the live view, which for some reason I still have a project called slider test, but don't ask me why, I haven't changed the name. But in here, what you can see, hopefully, is, there we go. So here's an example where I'm specifying a default. So a default for the slider, based on its ID, I've defined all the properties. And then what I've done is created another version for Android. So I've got a platform-specific tag, and Alloy takes care of then overriding the standard ID. So this ID gets applied first because it's not been made platform-specific. So it will apply the properties there to the slide object, but then it will say, we've got some overrides here for Android, and it will then change the width, the 90 instead of 85, the bottom to 30 instead of 25, just for Android. And equally, I could create one for iOS, and it would then make that for iOS. And the nice thing is that in this case, it's going to include both, but if I have one for iOS and one for Android, it would only include the relevant one for the platform. There is a third option, which is more talking about the way Alloy works, where you can actually, I can actually create a new folder here called Android. Then I can drop in a TSS file with the same name. So let's say in this case slider.tss, and then that will be my Android override. That will be the Android version that runs instead of the normal version. So you can actually do platform-specific overrides for your views, your controllers, and your TSS, or you can do the inline tag, which I sort of prefer because I think in most cases, you know, the bulk of your code is going to be fairly similar, and there might be a few slight changes you with Android. I've seen a couple of examples where people have created a subfolder for Android and almost duplicated the code again, which just seems crazy because you're just, changing it in one place, having to change it in another place, whereas you can have that generic code and then just override it to a platform. But there's multiple ways of doing it.
And Jason, where and how do you handle tablet versus, a smartphone or different screen size layouts? And how do you usually approach that?
How do you target different screen sizes?
Right.
So you've got two options within Alloy, which is the tablet. You can target tablets and non-tablets effectively. So for iPad, and I think I've got an example in here somewhere for tablet. Let's see if I can find it. It's in questions. Here we go, yeah. So here's an example here. As you can see that where we're targeting, in this case I'm targeting iOS and Android, but this is for form factor tablet. So for this particular style will only get used on, I can't remember what the resolution size is, but the form factor of tablet usually means over a certain number of pixels or dp to be able to classify it as a tablet. But it essentially means iPad or Nexus 7 and upwards, 7-inch and upwards, and that will then target that particular form factor. But what you can't do in here yet, which is what I was sort of trying to solve, is you can't do the orientation. That would be quite cool. It'd be quite cool if you could say orientation, I can spell it correctly, equals landscape. Yeah. That would be quite neat. But that can't work here because this stuff is taken and turned into titanium code. So that sort of concept of doing that here can't really work because this doesn't exist in final code. This is taken and turned into titanium code. So it would have to I guess it would have to store two states, a bit like I'm trying to do, and then dynamically switch between them. So I guess it's possible, and it would be great if they could add it, because I think it would make that a little bit, it would make that really cool if we could just say orientation in there and target the actual layout. So that's basically how you target tablet.
Other questions? I'm curious from a performance perspective, if you compared your approach to the create style method, if you saw any noticeable degradation in performance.
I missed that, sorry.
Could you speak up?
Yeah, sorry. I was wondering if you compare the performance of your approach to the Alloy create style method, and if there was any degradation in performance with the approach that you take.
Yeah, there's a degradation of quality in the Alloy code, your code.
Yeah, I think the question was the technique that you use to do the styling. The question was, did you notice a difference in performance, I guess, between what Appcelerator is doing with their approach versus your approach? That's the question.
I think, from what I've seen, I think they're using a similar approach. I think they're actually doing an apply property. And when you say I want to add this class to the object, it's basically taking the properties of that object, or that class, and it's doing an apply property. So it's actually pretty much doing exactly what I'm doing. So performance-wise, I don't think there's a difference. I'm obviously going to say I prefer mine. I only prefer mine because I just find it's much easier to have one object defined and then just do the substyle rather than have separate classes. But if you look at the way that the demo app works, I'll just go back to it, if I can find it, it is pretty similar. You probably won't get it over the WebEx, but what it's actually doing is an apply properties. In both cases, you don't want to be using this sort of globally on the whole window to be able to auto-update the whole window because you don't want it iterating through loads of objects that are never going to be different in landscape or portrait. So one of the things in the documentation, if I just find Alloy Dynamic Styles, there's actually a property called style. And that's what they're using as a way of saying which view do you want to be included within that process. Let me just see if I can find it. So down here, they talk about the auto style property. So if you look, I'm not sure if you can see that, but basically there's an auto style attribute. And so what you do is you basically say, in my example here, index.xml, oops, that's the wrong one, Stylin, I'm in the wrong app. In my index.xml, I've actually got here, you can see the attributes. So that is basically telling the Alloy 1.2 method, I guess what it's saying is, I want you to do your magic on everything within that window. Whereas, if I just wanted label to be the one that was doing that, I could say, auto style equals true on there, take it off the window, and it would then only apply to the label. So I guess that's their way of preventing that overhead of going through everything within the view. It's just kind of what I'm doing with the ignore children type property. But yeah, to answer the question, I think the overhead is the same on both. I think it still has to go through the screen and do stuff, and there's no real way to avoid that. The way I've tried to mitigate any performance issue is try and do it, apart from the example I'm showing you here where it's doing it all the time, is if I'm applying a theme, I'm doing that before the window opens, so that it's done all its work before it has to display it. But considering it's doing that, in real time, it's not too bad. And I suppose the other thing is this is a straight switch. I'm just applying the property. I guess the other option that you've got is you could do an animate. So you could have a fade in, fade out, or you could do an actual animate of the property, so that it's a smoother transition potentially. But that might have another overhead in terms of animation, CPU and display and everything else.
Other questions? You have another question? Okay. I guess one question I had, Jason. So you showed us with the technique you were originally using, where you were inserting your widget tag in the XML file at the bottom of the set of widgets of elements. How did you walk through and find out what the other elements were? What technique did you use to do that? I'm kind of curious how you did that.
So basically, there's a guy that one of the Titans is called, I'm going to get his name right because it's dodgy otherwise. It's Fokker Zanderbergen.
Right.
And Fokker is playing around with Alloy. And what he's done with Alloy is he's been delving into the resources folder and seeing what Alloy actually creates. And it's a bit like that discovery of the sort of _, double _ proto object that people play with in JavaScript. What he discovered was that there is an object defined in the resources when you create widget, which references the parent view that the widget is in. So in the case of my example, let me go back to index. So I'm dropping my widget here within this particular window. And what I'm able to do with the widget itself, and here's the code for the widget, is there's an object called parent symbol, double _ parent symbol, and that's a sort of hidden object in Alloy, if you like, that references the object that this widget has been added to, the parent control. And that's basically what I'm then using. So I'm using that object to be able to get to its children, and then from its children, I can then, so you can see here, I've then installed the parent symbol. Cool. I'm using that object as my parent to then go through to the children. And the only issue I came across, which I solved by positioning that tag, was that when I was trying it for the first time, I basically had an issue, where it wasn't picking up the children. And the reason is that I was adding the widget here. So I was actually adding the widget before the children were being defined. And that caused a really bizarre effect when the final code, where basically it was almost like a snapshot. So the widget was being created and rendering and grabbing the window object before all its children have been created. So it basically had no children. And I thought this technique wasn't going to work, and I kept going back to it, it was really frustrating. And then I just sort of played around and thought, hold on a minute, let's just try it down here. And it worked, and suddenly there were 3 children shown, or 2 children shown, and all of a sudden the whole technique worked. And it was just about the positioning of that widget. So, position the widget before the closing tag, and then effectively the widget has access to all the objects above it. Huh. And that sort of simple discovery, which Dr. showed me, means when it comes to widgets, you can do loads more things. So I've got another widget in here, which is the tab group widget. So this is this basically recreated the tab group, because I wanted to have a bit more flexibility with pod and the layout of the tab group. And I also wanted that tab group to appear on Android exactly in the same place. I also wanted the option to be able to put it at the top if I wanted to as well. So I've basically done it as a tab group, and you can still have sub-tab or sub-navigation and all the normal things you get. And the main reason I'm able to do that, have that interaction, is because I'm using the same object. I'm doing that parent symbol thing. And you can see on this is how the tab group works. So I actually have a sort of dummy window that I create with the widget in. And then I have all my other windows created underneath. And then I have a little bit of control, a little bit of code in the controller to tie the 2 things together. And that then enables me to interact with the tab group and its parent window. But yeah, that parent symbol was the key. That basically allows you to have widgets that can be dropped on screen, dropped on view, and then interact with all the elements of that view really easily.
All right, that's really cool. Anything else? Anybody? Okay, I think we're done with questions, Jason.
Cool.
Really want to thank you. I realize how late it is there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.